On a trip shrouded in secrecy, U.S. President Barack Obama flew into Iraq today. The president arrived in the country after ending his two-day visit to Turkey with a meeting of religious leaders and stops at two of the country's most historic sites. Mr. Obama's final day included a town hall meeting with college students in Istanbul. He reached out to the Muslim youth, saying he is seeking a new chapter in American relations with the Muslim world. Before leaving Turkey, Mr. Obama, accompanied by Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, visited the Hagia Sophia Museum and the Blue Mosque. In an address to the Turkish lawmakers Monday, Mr. Obama expressed strong support for Turkey's bid to become a European Union member, calling Ankara a responsible partner. Turkey is the final stop on Mr. Obama's European tour, which included an economic summit in London last week, NATO meetings in France and Germany, and an EU-US summit in the Czech Republic.
Now joining us to talk more about President Obama's trip is Jim Malone, VOA's national correspondent. Jim, welcome back to In Focus.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of President Obama's surprise stop in Iraq? Obviously, it was unexpected. His first as a president. What do you make of that stop in light of his trip?
Well, of course, high secrecy anytime you go into a war zone. This is his first visit to Iraq as president. He's there to show support for the troops and for the mission. Don't forget, Mdiake, this trip has been about engaging the world. At the same time, the president's been clear at every stop that the challenge of terrorism is real and that the United States is not going to back away, even though there may be differences with some of its allies around the world. So again, a stop to show support for the troops and for the mission in Iraq to wind up this historic trip.
Now, just before he landed in Iraq, Mr. Obama had been in Turkey, where he put it out there that, you know, the U.S. is not at war with Islam, that it finds that the Muslim world is a critical ally. What do you think was significant about that message, particularly during this trip that he was on?
Well, this was a very important aspect of the trip. It's really opening a new chapter, not only with the Muslim world, but with the rest of the world after 8 years of President George W. Bush. I think the Obama officials have been very happy with the way the trip has gone, generally in presenting a new tone of engagement with the world, with the United States, and particularly in this last stop, focusing on opening doors to the Muslim world, which of course have been somewhat in disrepair over the last several years, especially over the issue of the war in Iraq.
Now, Jim, how much impact do you think President Obama's message really will have on, say, the American public, which recent polls show are still very skeptical about the Muslim nation or Muslims as an ally?
Well, I think most Americans still are open to the idea of engagement with the Muslim world, and this trip in general may be helping President Barack Obama here at home. Two new polls show his public approval rating at 66%. That's pretty high. So this new sort of U.S. attitude to the rest of the world seems to be playing pretty well here at home as well.
Jim, how can you sum up President Obama's trip in terms of the image that now America has with Europe and the rest of the world during his trip, you know, covering the G20 summit, the NATO summit, as well as the EU-US summit?
I think it's trying to show the United States has a new attitude. It's more attuned to now listening to world leaders, and a number of the leaders on the trip said this, that they detect a new sense from this new American president that the United States wants to engage with the world, not so much preach or lecture the world as perhaps has been done in the past, at least through the interpretation of those leaders. So turning the page in American relations with the rest of the world, something President Obama promised as a candidate last year.
Very briefly, Jim, he obviously used that town hall meeting concept that was so successful for him here. How would you say it worked for him over there?
Pretty well. It's about engaging with people directly. That's what the town hall format allows. He did that in France before the NATO summit, and again in Turkey with the students. Seemed to work very well.
Thank you so much, Jim Malone. It's always a pleasure to have you out there.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right.